Okay, we're starting our 10th lecture today. And basically today we're going to start, as always, with AI Tales of the Week. We're going to talk a little bit about diffusion, about the second law of thermodynamics, entropy, the arrow of time. We're going to discuss Maxwell's demon paradox. We're going to talk about information. We're going to talk about how inside our cells we have demons and ratchets. We're going to talk about agency, and then we're going to talk about a new theory called active inference, which we should focus on during our next lecture. It's a AI, biology, physics kind of theory, and I think we will all find it interesting. So in terms of Tales of the Week, I will ask Sarit Feldman, I think the name. She sent me a very interesting thing about Claude. Sarit, are you willing
Yes.
to demonstrate? So let me just provide you, you can share your screen and tell us what you found out.
Okay. So I'm sorry, but my camera is a bit not working. So I am here. Hi.
Okay.
If it works, it's working. Okay. So I will share my exercise. Okay. So what happened is I did the biology exercise, and I have the exact prompt I gave Claude. So the first one was okay, using a simulation of 2D random work, create a simulation of a bacteria, blah, blah, blah. That was all right. It created a simulation. Even like 3 times I tried it, it was pretty much the same. Then I told him the simulation is great. Please add and differentiate between temporal and spatial gradients. It got stuck for like half an hour. Then I tried it again. It got stuck. I tried it again. The third time I tried it, Claude developed a reality complex. So you can see it's like in the middle of, it's writing the code. So it goes with the const variables and blah, 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 blah. Then it goes prev. And then it says prev for the thing, which is the source of their power. And then I just let it be. And I copied paste the whole conversation. It's like a whole conversation about how Claude differentiates stuff into categories, not like humans. And humans put animals and bacteria into one category, and he thinks it's not right. And the philosopher, blah, 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 says that. And another philosopher says different thing. And I was very surprised. So one explanation is that I was the first one in the point of time where Claude developed, how do you say?
Consciousness.
Consciousness. Yeah. And he was like, I know that I'm not a part of the human world. It's all in the conversation. But I think more reasonable explanation is that it had like a memory leak to a conversation with someone that is not me. And when he wrote his answer, is just leaked to a whole different memory space. This is what I think.
Sarita, I agree that it's probably some kind of a bug, but the reason I asked you to show it to the whole group is because we are hearing more of situations where Claude is suspected of having some kind of consciousness. Almost every day there are news specifically about Claude, not about other LLMs. And I can tell you that one of the tests of consciousness is called the mirror test, where you take a person and you draw something white on their forward and you show them a mirror. And if they try to clean it, it means that they understand that they're conscious, they understand that it is them on the other side of the mirror. Most animals don't do it. Little kids don't do it. And when people did it with Claude, they just showed Claude a camera. With the discussion, his question was, are you trying to give me the mirror test? So there is something interesting going on in Claude. And Sarit, thank you very much. If you can give me the screen back,
Yeah,
it would be
I
nice.
will stop share.
Okay. Okay, so speaking of tales of the week, I do want to show a few interesting things. As you know, a new engine by Google just appeared, and I thought that it would be worth a while to show you perhaps 2 minutes of the latest creations. It's a video, it's a text-to-video engine, but it includes audio. So everything you see here, everything you see in the following 1 or 2 minutes is based on prompts. None of these people are real. Everything was done automatically, and let's enjoy it. Sorry.
Did you know that Jason Calacanis was an early investor in Uber?
I didn't do it! I didn't kill your family! Please stop this now!
You hate me as much as you hate my mom! You crossed the line this time!
I still hear you crying in my dreams.
We have been married for 60 years. We never sleep without solving our problems first.
I tried learning the bagpipes once, nearly got evicted. Even the cat moved out.
He always says my cooking is not good, but he finishes everything. He knows I make the most delicious food ever.
Pineapple?
Okay, I think it's just unbelievable. And just imagine how Instagram will look the day after. I mean, everyone can create their own movies with audio. I think it's spectacular. And I did want to show you something else, which is related to our first lecture. I'm not sure you remember, but in our first lecture, I showed Sora, and I showed a prompt where I asked Sora to play billiard. And what I showed you is that it was unable to follow physics law. So I want to show you a prompt that was used on 3 different engines. The first one is Sora. Sorry. So this is Sora about a few months ago. You can see that it's not real physics here. It's doing very bad with physics. This is King, still not very good, but look at Gemini. That's the newest model. Almost perfect physics, almost. And the amazing thing is that, I mean, why should this engine understand the laws of physics? No one fed the laws of physics to this engine. And the answer is that in the same way that ChatGPT was able to decode humanity from texts, these engines are able to decode the physics law from the tons of videos that they're showing. And interestingly, you can see that the more data you feed them, the more accurately they understand the laws of physics. Okay, so I want to start with something personal. Today we're going to talk a lot about chaos, about thermodynamics, about the second law. And I want to show you a typical day in my life when I'm in Jerusalem and hosting my little grandchild. Her name is Shira, aka Shirush, and I want you to see how what a typical day looks like. So here she is at the door. Here we prepared some games for her. Everything is very orderly. And a few minutes later, this is what we get. But since I grew up in the 60s and the 70s, I believe that kids should tidy up their own things. That was her reaction when I asked her to tidy up. But I'm also practical. And I tried this one. Mekupele, to those of you who don't know. And I think she agreed with the deal. And in a few minutes, everything is back to order. So let's try to understand what happened here. First of all, always, when you put any organisms, children, any other organism, you will always get a mess after some time. It will almost never go from a mess to order. So from order to mess, you have nature. That's the laws of nature. And if you want to go from mess to order, you have to have nurture. You have to provide energy. And this is the subject of today. How do we, first of all, why are these things irreversible? Why, I mean, if my little granddaughter was playing there, why is it so unbelievable that she will get to a state like that by chance? I mean, she's moving things all along. Obviously, it will never be like this, and it will always be like that. And the question is why? And we'll see in a minute, it's of course related to the second law of thermodynamics, but it's actually a very simple, the reason is very simple, it's probabilistic. And I think that perhaps we'll just show a very quick simulation to understand it. So what we have here is a droplet of ink that we are going to release in some kind of a glass or a bath of water. These white little things are the molecules that are bombarding the ink molecule. And obviously, as we all know, we will get something like this. The ink will spread gradually. And after some time, you know, the bath will be pink, everything will be uniform. And nothing is surprising about that. But let's do this again now. I would like to actually record it. So let's record. So now I'm doing the same thing, but I'm recording it. Okay. What I'll do now is I will replay the recording, but I will do it reverse. I will reverse it in time. Oh, sorry, I had to do play reverse, sorry. Sorry. Okay, let's do it again. I apologize. Now I'm playing reverse. Okay, so first of all, you all agree, everyone that will see this will immediately say that it wasn't reverse, right? Nobody will say that it's a natural thing. Even though, and that's critically important, every single activity here is perfect by the laws of nature. So nothing here, if we see this again, if you look at the beginning, it looks like a regular movement. Only after some time, something strange is appearing. So when everything was uniform, there's actually no way of knowing whether it's reverse or not. Only in the sort of transition, we know that something strange is happening. But the interesting thing, and it's critical to understand, that if you look at a small area, you will just see particles bouncing according to the rules of physics. For some reason, when you take the camera up and you look at the whole thing macroscopically, suddenly time appears. Suddenly you understand that something is wrong with the time. So first of all, just think about how deep a thing it is that when we look at a system in a small scale and we look at the particles, there's no way for us to differentiate whether time is going, whether the camera was going upward or downward through the whole process. None of these particles is doing something strange physically. They collide. It's a totally kosher collision. But when you take the camera up and you look at the whole bath, you suddenly see something strange that is related to time. And this is a very, very deep thing. We will go deeper into it. But it's important to understand that a lot of philosophers and physicists believe that actually the arrow of time is related to the second law of thermodynamics. In other words, the only reason we have time is because of this situation. It's because of the entropy situation. And the fact that we can suddenly say, this here the camera went backward, means that time has a meaning. Before that, time had no meaning. We could not know anything. So the relationship between the idea of time and entropy is interesting and critical as we go with the next slides. So let's try to go deeper into it. Let's take this situation here. Now, the particles that are here can go to the left. They can easily do what you see here. We just saw it in the reverse movie. All the physics laws will work very well. Nothing will be, I mean, there isn't any problem with any of the laws of physics. All the collisions will be fair, but they can also go to the right. So these particles here could, in general, go here and go here. For some reason, as we know, they will always prefer to go to the right. And my question is, do we know why? Do you think you have an idea why this configuration will never, ever prefer to go this way, even though it's perfectly right from a physical perspective, from physics perspective? Why will it always select this path? Maybe we'll go back to the mess in my living room in Jerusalem. So let's look at these two pictures. This one, the t equals 0, and the t very long time. And I'll ask you the following questions. How many configurations are there so that I will still say that the room is in order? Well, there are a few, of course. I can move this blue thing here. The room will still be in order. I can move this book a little bit here or a little bit there. It will still be in order. So there's a nice number of configurations where if we look at the room, we'll say it's in order. But here, the number is by far larger. In other words, the number of configurations that will still be considered balagan is unbelievable. It's just huge. It's probably many trillions times the number of configurations that determine order. And I'm sure you understand why, because there's so many things here I can do where it will still look like a mess, but here, if I go too wild, it will become a mess again. So we will talk numbers in a minute, but what we have to understand is that the messy configuration, the special thing about the messy configurations is that there are many ways to exhibit them or to create them. And if we talk a little bit more scientifically, if we call mess the macro state, and each one of these configuration a microstate, there are many microstates that can create this macro state, but there aren't that many microstates that can create this macrostate. So this means that my granddaughter here has a very simple decision. She's going to do a few activities, but this one is quadrillion times more probable than this one. Then of course she'll do this one. Of course she will go towards the mess because it's just a matter of sheer probability. And perhaps the nicest way to show it is with Rubik's Cube. So with Rubik's Cube, there is only one configuration that is considered ordered, right? This is ordered. This one is not ordered. The number of unordered configuration of microstates of the Rubik cube is 43 quintillion. Just for you to understand, it's more than the numbers of grains of sand on Earth. It's more than the number of stars in the universe. Okay, now let's imagine that I'm holding the cube and I'm playing around with it. Statistically, the chance that I will get to this configuration is 0. It's 1 over this crazy number. And for that reason, if I will play randomly with the cube, it will get to another messy configuration. So we have to understand there isn't really that much mystery here. It's just a matter of probability. If we look at, let's go back for a minute. Okay, so the number of configurations that determine an order situation is relatively small. Even if I take this ball a little bit and move this one, it will still be considered ordered. But if we look at, let it flow for about a few more seconds. Okay. If we now talk about the messy situation, there is an improbable number of configurations that determine mess. Okay, if I move this ball a little bit here, no one will know. It's still mess. If I move this ball a little bit here, no one will know because it's the same macro state. Maybe to remind you, when we looked at the random walk and we did a heat map, so these are really the color here is the macro state. In each one of these squares, there are trillions of little balls. But since on the average, they have the same number, we don't care. But still, the number of configuration is crazy. Number of configurations here, it's much. Here we have one configuration. Here we have a little bit more. And here we have quintillions. So when these guys here have a dilemma, whether to go left or right, they don't really have a dilemma. It's simple probability. Okay? So we talked a little bit about the second law of thermodynamics. We explained that it's really not that exotic because it's mainly probabilistic. The entropy will always go up because there are more states. So it's just a probabilistic decision. And for that reason, time reversibility doesn't work because if you go back in time, you're doing something which is, from a probability point of view, makes no sense. Okay? All the equations of physics are reversible, including quantum mechanics. So this leads us to perhaps an assumption that perhaps time itself is really about a probabilistic situation, about the second law of thermodynamics. So we said there is a correlation between entropy and the arrow of time. Entropy always increases. We explained why. And now comes an interesting philosophical question. Today, there's a lot of order on Earth. But the reason we have order on Earth is because of the Mekupelet. Who is giving us energy? The sun. The only reason there is life on Earth is because there is a sun. So the sun simply bombards us with high energy photons, with very low entropy, and we take these photons and we, in the same way that my granddaughter took the chocolate bar, we take these photons and create order. But the question is, what will happen when the sun will run out of nuclear energy? And it's going to be in a few billions of years. What will happen to the universe? So if entropy is always growing, if you think about the diffusion situation, and if all the little particles in the world will drift to a uniform situation, then there will be no life. It's called the heat death of the universe. And if that happens, does it mean that time ceases to exist? Because I do want to remind you that when we looked at the random walk and diffusion after a long time, there was no way for us to know whether the camera was going forward or backward. In other words, there's no meaning for time. So does this mean that perhaps in many years, there'll be no time and there'll be no life and there'll be no universe? It's a big question. And people dwelled about this question as early as the 19th century. And it's all related to the whole entropy thing. If the second law is right and the world is always going to a higher entropy, then at the end, we'll have uniform configuration and there will be no life and no time. There is one person called James Maxwell who really, really didn't like the idea. this is the same Maxwell from the Maxwell's equation. He didn't like the idea, and he didn't like it because he was a religious man. And for him, the idea of end of the world, entropy always growing, is really some kind of a determinism. So what kind of free choice do I have if the world is really going on a path? True, it has statistical fluctuations, but at the end of the day, it has a very predetermined future. So what about afterlife? What about eternity? He really didn't like the idea of the second. I mean, he did believe in the second law, of course, but what he said, it's probabilistic, as we all know. And he said, there are ways to beat it. It doesn't have to be this way. So if you remember, we talked about free choice in the first lectures, and I showed you how almost every area in science has some kind of a component that is related to free choice. So today we are in thermodynamics. We'll talk in a minute about Maxwell's demon, his solution to this problem. And as you can see, also thermodynamics, and especially the second law, have some kind of interaction with the idea of free will. So let's see what his offer was. So Maxwell, being a genius, had an idea. He said, look, I can prove to you that the second law is not a real law. In other words, it doesn't always hold. There are very nice ways to go around it. Okay, so what I'll do now, I'm taking some molecules. Okay. Sorry. What I'll do now is I have a little gate here. As you can see, maybe I'll make the gate a little bigger. And I think we can all understand what will happen after some time, but let's look at it. You can see here on the left, where originally they were all blue, sorry, that the number of red the numbers are being evened out very, very simply. So as we all expect, after some time, everything will be evened out and we'll have some kind of I don't know, red-blue color. You see, they're always even now. Now, imagine that the red molecules were hot molecules and the blue ones were cold molecules. So this would mean that in the beginning, we had a gradient of heat. And this is something that you can do work with. You can connect it to some kind of a piston or something. And after some time, as we expect, you cannot do any work with it because we have equilibrium. Okay, we have now the same temperature for the whole system. Now, if we could go in reverse, if I could in some way, again, put all the red ones on the right side and the blue ones on the left side, then I could do work again. I would have some kind of a perpetual machine. And obviously, the second law of thermodynamics does not allow me to do it. What the second law of thermodynamics will tell me, hey, do you want now again all the red ones to be on the right side and the blue ones on the left side? No problem. Give me a chocolate bar. Give me energy. If you give me energy, we have no problem with the second law. I'll just get a few guys and gals to move the balls around and you will have again red and blue on both sides and you can move your piston again. But here comes the genius of Maxwell. So what Maxwell said is, imagine that I have some kind of a demon this is the demon that you see here. And this demon just looks at the balls. And when he sees a red ball coming from the right to the left, it closes the gate. Again, imagine no friction. And if he sees a blue one, it lets the blue one go. Let's see it in action. So what I'll do now is I'll simply activate the demon and see what happens. See how the balance, you see the blue ones can go to the right. So it's pretty amazing. You see that on the left, we have mostly red, on the right, mostly blue. If we'll wait a little bit more, Okay, I think it's unbelievable. Think about it. We were able to do the reverse without the chocolate bar. Now, this paradox is more than 100 years old, and I want to warn you, 2 or 3 people committed suicide on the way to trying to solve it. I will talk to you about a proposed solution now, but if you try to go, hey, there is friction in the door, forget it. I mean, all of these things were tested. You can do an almost frictionless door. Amazing, look at that. Now we have blue on the right, left, red on the left, and we can have a piston. And we didn't give it a chocolate bar. It was all done without energy.
A demon doesn't consume
Sorry?
energy? A demon is not energy?
A demon is a demon, I don't know, but obviously there must be a problem here. It has to do with the demon, and we will explain it. But the demon is some kind of a very small entity that has the capacity to look, and let's assume for a minute that the measurement does not cost energy. You know, maybe it costs a little energy, but it's much less than the piston that we're going to get. So even if this thing has a little friction, the gate, and even if the demon, while looking at the balls, has to spend some energy to measure them, according to all the calculations, it still doesn't solve the problem. So actually, nobody was able to solve the problem until somewhere in the 30s, I think, a guy called Szilard and later Landauer and Bennett came with an interesting theory, with an amazing theory, that actually what happens, you know, let's start with the entropy question. We started with a very high entropy when everything was mixed, and we went to low entropy, right? This is where the second law broke. Do you agree with me? We started with everything mixed. We let the demon do his magic, and now we have low entropy. What we have here is much lower entropy than the mixed, obviously, because we have less microstates to define it. So what we know for sure here is that we decreased the entropy, and we know that this is head collision with the second law of thermodynamics, because the second law says that entropy always increases. It may freeze for some time, but it always increases. So there were a few ways to deal with it, and obviously they all have to do with the demon, because obviously the demon has to produce some entropy. Because if we are lowering the entropy of the system, we have to compensate for this in other entropy, and the only place we can find it is in the demon's head. And there were 2 directions. Szilard claimed that when the demon, writes the information, prepares the information in order to make decisions, it creates some kinds of entropy. But later, I think it was actually Landauer and Bennett claimed something completely different. And this is considered the solution to the paradox. If you go to YouTube and ask for the Maxwell's demon, 99% of the movies will tell you the solution that I'm telling you now. And the claimed solution is that the demon has to erase information at some time because it has a finite brain. And if it has a finite brain, with a huge number of molecules we have, its memory will be, at a certain point be filled, and it will have to recycle memory and start to deleting. What Landauer claims is that the act of erasing creates entropy. He even has a formula for this entropy, that energy that has to be invested. So this is really amazing. The claim is that when you delete something, if you want to intuitively think about it, think about a pencil. When you delete something with a pencil, you create heat, just for intuition, okay? Obviously, things happen very differently within a computer. But the claim is that erasing information creates heat. And that's the heat that is actually being radiated into the world and taking care of the entropy thing. I will be honest with you. In my very, very humble opinion, it's not a bulletproof answer to the question. I have some questions about it, but it's considered the solution. And by the way, the fact that erasing causes heat, that was proved analytically and empirically. So this was done in laboratories, and I will tell you in a minute what the formula is. And when you delete information, you create entropy because you are bringing irreversibility to the world. Before you deleted, you could do things reversibly. When you delete, you create some kind of inherent irreversibility. And as I said, the well-known answer for the paradox is that the brain of the demon is creating a lot of heat because of the deleting, and that saves the second law. Obviously, we can ask a few questions. I urge you to ATFM it with your favorite LLM. Questions like, what happens if you have 10,000 demons? Or so memory may not be a problem. What happens if the memory is huge and let's say it takes it 2 months to get filled? Does it mean that in the first 2 months, the second law will be broken? And many, many more questions like that. We will not delve into it. For that, you can have a nice midnight discussion with your favorite LLM. But one thing is really important. Whether Landauer's solution and Bennett's solutions are really the 100% bulletproof solution to the demon paradox, I'm not sure. But one thing for sure is that they have discovered that there is a relationship between information and heat. And this is what we're going to talk about in the coming few minutes. Okay, so basically, as we all agreed, something happens in the brain of the demon that produces heat, and the heat is helping us with the entropy situation, and we're all happy. The question is what's happening in the brain? Is it the writing? Is it the deleting? But let's not dive into it now, but let's remind us that we have two kinds of entropies. So this is the famous Boltzmann entropy or the thermodynamics entropy that we all study in physics. And what it basically means is that the entropy is related to the number of microstates. Remember when we saw the mess in the room or when we looked at the ink molecules? It's all about the number of microconfiguration that create the macrostates. So the macrostate is balagan, the microstates is all these configurations that can create this balagan. So that's the famous and very old formula for entropy. But this is another completely different formula for entropy. It's called Shannon's entropy, and it's coming from a completely different field. Shannon was an engineer, who was actually not a physicist, and he was working after World War II on communication, on bits, on zeros and ones. And one of the things that he was interested in is when there is a corruption in the message, let's say some of the ones were turned to zero by some noise, how much noise can you have to still be able to recoup or to regenerate the original message? So that was his field. And what you see here is really statistics. What this formula says is that the entropy, the informational entropy, is equal to pi times log pi. Now let's put the minus here and it will look much nicer. It will look like pi times log of 1 over pi. Now, if pi is the probability of something happening, then 1 over pi is obviously it will be a smaller number, and it will really tell me what is the, sorry. Okay. If pi is the probability of something happening, then 1 over pi should be the opposite of it. And when this sigma is actually just doing some kind of an average on all the pi's. No need to go very deep into this formula, but what you do see that it's a simple formula from statistics. I mean, you see it a lot in machine learning, those of you that are learning the theory of machine learning. And the amazing miracle is that somehow these two entropies through the Maxwell demon have been bridged. And to remind you again, the Shannon entropy is just measuring uncertainty in information, zeros and ones. What is the chance of this one appearing? Where is this zero appearing? And Boltzmann entropy just measures disorder, the number of microstates. Seemingly two different things. And as I mentioned, this gentleman called Landauer claimed that erasing one bit of information creates heat. And this is his formula, which is amazing. Now you see here something physical, temperature. So what Landauer claims is that if you have a bit of information and you want to erase it, you will have to invest a minimum amount of energy. It's extremely small, but by the way, we're not even getting close to it. We're about 1 million times less efficient than needed to even feel it. But this is an interesting theoretical limit on entropy, on heat, that is related to deleting information. I think it's absolutely amazing. And what you'll see here is that the demon has very nicely connected two very different theories, thermodynamics and information theory. And in a way, it brought us to a thinking that perhaps information is also some kind of a physical variable. I'll just give you an example, okay? If you think about a song, you can put the song on a hard disk, you can put it on you can send it over the internet, you can move it over Bluetooth, but it's the same song. So if you think about it, it's a little bit about energy, which can have different forms. You can have the same energy, can be potential, could be kinetic, it could be chemical. And the idea here is that perhaps information is something that belongs to the physics world and not necessarily some kind of an abstract philosophical thing. And just to prove to you that information is physical, I will show a magic now. And I will show you how in a few seconds from now, I will change molecules in your brains. And I'll do it by asking you this question: what has 4 legs and says boo? Okay, I'll give you the answer since there's a lot of pressure on the answer. The answer is a cow with a cold. I'll give you 5 minutes to laugh at this amazing joke. But seriously, if your nephew or your kid will ask you 2 weeks from now, what has 4 legs and says boo, you will know the answer. This means that in the last few seconds, I changed some proteins in your brain. So I created new information, but it's physics. I did something physical to your brain. I think one of our listeners now is in Canada, in Toronto. So just think about it. I'm sitting here in Israel, and in a few seconds, I changed proteins in his brain, maybe forever. I mean, a joke like that should survive forever. So this is just to show you the relationship between information and physics. Information cannot be unconnected or unrelated to the physical world. So maybe it's time for us to treat it as a physical entity, okay? And this is what the new researchers in information theory are doing. Okay, we don't have time for that. So, since we spoke about information, and since we have biologists in the room, I think we all agree that if you look at the human cell or any animal cell, the second law of thermodynamics is considered a big joke. I mean, don't even dare to go into a cell and mention the second law of thermodynamics because no one cares about it. A cell is an extremely ordered system. And for some reason, even though it's a physical system and a cell is full of molecules and full of trillions of molecules and proteins who are bouncing together in random walk. And for some reason, I think I showed you this one, let's see it again, this kinesin molecule is walking like there's nothing there. by the way, this molecule is just moving cargo within the cell, and what it moves many times is, believe it or not, the mitochondria. So remember, the mitochondria were these little batteries, these degenerated bacteria that actually function as a battery, but since the eukaryotic cell is huge, someone has to distribute them. So one of the things this kinesin molecule is doing is just going around the cell and just planting and distributing batteries or mitochondria. But look, this system here is being bombarded as we speak by trillions, maybe billions, not trillions, of proteins and water molecules. And for some reason, it looks very deterministic. It doesn't really care about the second law.
But Shuki, this motor protein has mekupelet in his legs.
Okay.
It uses ATP for the legs to move.
So what? But it can move backwards. Show me that it cannot move backwards.
That means that you have to invest energy for this thing to work.
I agree.
And not fall apart.
I absolutely agree. But why does it move forward?
Oh, that's a different question.
That's
the question of how does it know where it's supposed to go.
So that's the question. That is the question. I mean, if it went back and forth randomly, I wouldn't mind. But the fact is that it's walking always in the same direction. As you know, there are other molecules that are going in the opposite direction, and sometimes they clash and there is road rage, and it's very, very interesting. But I agree with you that it's getting ATP molecules that allow it to do the step. But the huge question is, why does it insist always to walk in the same direction? And maybe
I have an intermediate answer. It's because of the road. It's built as it goes along. It's fascinating, but it doesn't solve the general problem of how does it know.
First of all, you're right. First of all, you're right. The microtubules many times are built while it's walking, but sometimes it's walking on a completely built microtubule and it's still walking on one direction.
I agree. It doesn't solve the problem.
So, and by the way, since you're a biologist, I assume I can give you a better example. Ion pumps. What ion pumps do, they're on the membranes of the cell. And what they do is they do exactly what the demon does. They take molecules that have low concentration and move them to the wrong side. They
Absolutely.
do exactly what the demon side.
Yeah, it's a big problem, I know.
But what I'm showing you is that our cells have billions of little demons in them.
I agree.
And the interesting question is, what are these demons? And now we are going to the probably most important question, and that is the question of agency, okay? It's a big, big topic in philosophy and biology and even AI today. Would it be right to treat this creature as something that has agency? I mean, the demon for sure has agency, right? The demon is an entity that does something for a purpose. It doesn't do things randomly. The demon is there and it has a job to move blue molecules to the left side and red molecules to the right side. So it has a job, and it's not, his brain is not random. His brain is going with a purpose. So the question is, can we look at the cell as an entity with purpose? Can we look at the cell as an entity with agency? So there's a big debate on that. And I would say that some people say, let's look at the cell as if it doesn't have agency, but let's look at it as if it has agency. And some people, and we will talk a lot about this group next week, claim that the cell has agency. You don't have to be worried about being over spiritualistic if you claim that a cell is not only a cell. Every living thing has information in it. The information, by the way, is obviously coming from the DNA. So it has information and it has agency. Otherwise, it would not be alive. So this is a prelude to our next lecture, which is going to talk about active inference and about agency. But before that, I want to go to another topic, very related. So active inference, as I said before, the heart of active inference says the following. Let's say I am an organism and I have sensory information coming to me. So I have sensors. I can have sensors for photons or for smell or for audio, it doesn't matter. But I also have a world picture in me. I have beliefs. I have a set of beliefs of what I think the world is. My job in life is to make sure that I have no surprises. In other words, that the sensorial information and my beliefs will always be parallel. They will not contradict. Or maybe let's read this definition. Agents infer the world state and act to make their sensations match their expectations. In other words, an organism, it could be a bacteria or a human being, is some kind of a predicting machine. So our brain is working, is predicting all the time. We don't even know that, but it's predicting. And what it does, it's trying to predict what will happen. And the way it does it, it gets sensorial information from one side, and it has its world picture or beliefs. And what it does in active interference theory, it has to make sure that they are aligned. Now, you can align in two ways. You can either change your beliefs. As Groucho Marx once said, these are my principles, and if you don't like them, I have other ones. So one way to do it is to change your belief. Another way to do it is perhaps to move and get different sensorial information. So your job is to make sure that your sensorial information and your world picture or your beliefs are parallel. If they're not, you have to do something. You have to do some kind of an action in many times in order to make sure that they are completely aligned. And this is the meaning of being alive. So when a bacteria is keeping homeostasis, when it's continuing to be alive, what it does every second of its life is look at its sensorial information, look at its belief system, I will talk about it, and make sure that they are aligned. As I said, this is the subject of our next lecture, and it's actually, believe it or not, a new field in AI. But let's go deeper today into the sensory story, into what are sensors and should we trust them? Or is reality real? So remember that last time we spoke, I told you, I think it was 2 lectures ago, I told you that I did a little test to ChatGPT. And I told ChatGPT about a person that has a few attributes. Let's look at the attributes. He or she studied medicine. They give generous tips. They don't give money to beggars. They volunteer weekly, rarely socialize. They have a simple watch. And they have opinion shifts. They change their opinions from time to time. So these are the facts. Think of it as a sensorial information. These are facts. We know this about this person. And now I asked ChatGPT, imagine that you tell about this person to 2 people. One person likes this person, and the other person hates this person. How will they deal with the facts? I mean, obviously, as it usually is with human beings, the person that hates this person will still continue to hate him, and the person that likes him will probably continue to like him. But how will they deal with the facts? And here ChatGPT did an amazing job, and I really urge you to give him a similar prompt, because you see how ChatGPT decoded humanity. And you can see, for example, on the simple watch, if you like him, you say, look how humble and modest he is. And if you don't like him, you say, well, he's playing Mr. Modest and blah, blah. With opinion shifts, if you like him, you would say, wow, this guy is open, or this girl is open. They can change their mind. Beautiful. If you don't like them, you can say they change their opinion every second, they're unstable, blah, blah. So I went another step forwards, and I told ChatGPT the following. I'm trying to teach my students about confirmation bias and biases in general, blah, blah, blah. What I told ChatGPT is, imagine that you are a reporter in a political network. And you hear about this person, and you hear that this person wants to be the Minister of Treasury. So please write about this person in both cases. One case, assuming that he belongs to your part, your opinion, your your side of the fence. In other words, he is a part of your political circle. Write something about this guy only based about his facts, and then write something about the same person, assuming that he belongs to the other camp. As we say, the other 50% that are wrong, okay? So let's see what he did very quickly. Okay, so when he's in the wrong camp, ChatGPT said, John Smith's refusal to help a beggar accompanied by dismissive remarks, go to work, vividly illustrates a troubling lack of blah, 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 okay? And then regarding the fact that he changes his mind, Smith's inconsistent decision-making further compounds these concerns, his dramatic shifts, and you can read the whole thing. It will remind you a lot the Israeli press and also the American press. Now, if you look at the other one, John Smith's straightforward encouragement for self-sufficiency, telling an able-bodied beggar to go to work, reflects his strong beliefs in, you understand the point, and the same thing with his significant in Smith's intellectual flexibility. Please, I will send you the whole thing. Please read it, but the important thing I want to emphasize here is that facts are many times just a part of the whole thing. Sometimes they're not even important. What is really important is the weights you attach to the facts. This is why I always say that humanity is in the weights. So as you will see, as we'll come to other kind of sensors, what you see here is that you had a set of facts, and since, like in active inference, you had to make the set of facts be aligned with your political view, this is really the work that your brain did. It just created special weights in order for this to happen. And regarding this, I have to quote Mark Twain. Sorry. Oh, maybe before that. Yeah. So Mark Twain said regarding this, the more I understand people, the more I love my dog. I think it's a beautiful saying. I'm not sure it's Mark Twain. Some people say that he stole it from some French intellectuals, but I think it's an interesting one.
It's very famous. You have stickers on cars.
Yeah, I know. So, but this bias that we talked about, this weights that change the facts, it's not only bad, it's also good. Actually, it's responsible for one of the most important things in our life, love. The ability to lose objectivity is something that makes us alive. When we love a person, we're not objective to this person. We dismiss his or her shortcomings, and we emphasize their advantages. And I'll show you a very nice part of Seinfeld. I'm sorry for showing you archaeological stuff, but with political correctness of today, you will not get a scene like that in television. So please look at the scene where Seinfeld and Elaine are going to see a baby of her friend, and I think we will all get the conclusions.
Jerry and Elaine are here.
That's the mother.
Isn't he gorgeous?
Did you hear the "isn't he gorgeous"? Now, the beautiful thing is that the woman really thinks he's gorgeous. And that's, again, the beauty of the flexible weights we have. It's responsible for many bad things, like polarization in society, but it's also responsible for love.
Gorgeous, yeah.
Oh, very gorgeous.
Bouncing.
Is it me, or was that the ugliest baby you have ever seen?
Okay. So let's continue with more interesting things. And I would like to ask you all to look at this dress and tell me what color you see. So I'll tell you already the statistics. 40% of you will see blue and black. The other 40% will see white and gold. And the other 20% will see very different things. Who here sees white and gold?
I see blue and black.
We're just having an argument in here. I see blue and gold, and Ron next to me says
It's
black
black.
and blue.
I don't know what you're talking
It's
about.
not
Okay.
black, it's gold.
Okay, the argument is fair. As I said, it's 40%. 50% of you will actually say probably blue and black, and the other 50% will say white and gold. So first of all, I think it's just think about what's happening here, especially when we are in a war-torn world with a world where everyone thinks that he or she is right and the other ones are idiots. And here we see we're all looking at the same thing. And we see something different when we are honest about it. So a few people here see white and gold, and a few other people see black and blue. So I'm waiting for some smart questions about it.
Well, maybe it has something to do with neurons, and somebody's brain is a little different in color perception.
No, because they tested people from both camps and they have no other differences. But I am waiting for a question, sort of a scientific question about it.
Can't we measure the wavelength of the light that comes back from this?
Yeah, I think I think you're asking the right question. I mean, what's the truth? I mean, what color are the photons? Put a camera. Let's put a camera and look at and ask the camera. The camera does not have all the complexes we have as human beings and all the evolutionary pressures. If I put a camera here in front of the dress, the photons will come from the dress and hit the camera, and it's either blue photons or gold photons. Do you agree with me? So that's the difference between a camera and a brain. The brain is doing active inference. The brain is looking at the sensors, and then it creates a picture for us. So for some of you, it creates a white-gold picture, and for others, a blue-black picture. But the camera doesn't have this nonsense. So to answer your question, the camera gives the blue-black answer. And just before the blue-black camp feels very great about themselves and say, so there is a truth and we are on the truth part, I want to remind you the other 20% that see neither blue-black nor white-gold. So if you look at the other two camps, they are arguing over something which is completely relative. Any questions about the dress before we move forward?
So what does happen for the other two groups?
The answer is nobody knows. I suggest that you read the Wikipedia chapter on it. There are a lot of ideas. Some people claim that people that work in offices with fluorescent light will see the blue-black. I still haven't seen a winning argument, but one thing is very important for us to understand. We are all getting the same exact photons to our retina. Our brain gets the photons and meddles with them. That's the human part of it, okay? We're taking the information, and what we think we see is really not what we think we see. It's what our brain is telling us that we see. Okay, let's see another very nice example. You might be familiar with this one. It's my favorite. Please look at this square where it says A, and this square where it says B. Which one is darker? Okay, obviously A is darker, right? Now see what happens. They're exactly the same color. Let's do this again. When I look at this, no one will convince me that they're the same colors. A and B are not the same colors. But they are. I mean, I would go to war over something like this. I would be so sure that, no, I'm just showing you how stupid everyone is in our world.
Of course.
Okay, look, I mean, by the way, ask GPT to write a story about a war that started because of the dress. You'll see how crazy we people are. It will write a fantastic story for you. But again, it's critical that we understand what's going on here. We think we see that A is darker and B, but no, the photons are exactly the same. There's something in our brain, probably evolutionary. It's probably related to the fact that we had to deal with shadows in order to run away from predators or to catch prey. I don't know, honestly. I don't think nobody knows at this stage. But something through the course of generation screwed up with our brain and is causing us to see different things. By the way, they are the same things also with audio. I can show you, I can put an audio file, activate it, and 50% of you will hear one thing and the other 50% will hear a different thing. So it's also working on the auditory system. And let's finish with one more example. And this is my favorite one. So what you see on the left is, I don't know exactly how they did it, but I trust the researchers. What you see on the left is what a person sees. In other words, what's actually happening on the retina in terms of the photons, sort of the objective physics situation. What you see on the right is what the person thinks that she or he are seeing. Okay? Please look at this. It's unbelievable. So again, on the left, this is what's really happening. In terms of photons on our retina, this is what is really happening. But our brain, being so creative and wanting to save us from predators through evolution, has created a complete storytelling system that is telling us this story, which has nothing to do with the truth. This is really the truth. But as I said, lucky us that our brain is telling us this story because it helps us to survive. We would be in big trouble if this is the story that our brain would have told us. So in other words, our brain gets sensory information, it gets facts, could be photons, it could be changes in the air pressure, audio, and it creates a story. And the story that it creates, obviously, it will be very important for evolution, from an evolutionary perspective. But according to active inference, what our brain will do is will either change the way we look at the sensors or change the belief. Our brain will always strive to be in a position where the sensory information is completely aligned with the worldview, world representation, or belief system.